I think one thing that you should be thinking about is just how to partner with the events organization from the beginning with the goal setting and really figuring out based off of what, the business has seen with previous experiences and previous campaigns and activations and landed, what experience is going to drive those results and what are some of the key, considerations to take into account when building the program, because I think that alignment at the beginning is super key in order to make sure that you're driving those results after the fact.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, man, we're gonna have a really good discussion today because goodness knows things have shifted a lot in regards to events within the past couple of years. It's going to continue to go that way, and we're going to try to get an understanding of what's going to happen in 2023 and look at what's new for B2B events in 2023. We're going to look a little bit in the past into some 2022 findings in a report, but then we're going to go forward, and we're going to do that all with Brianna Haag. Brianna, welcome.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, before we get into all of this, though, if you could, please tell the B2B DM gang a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So I am the director of demand generation at Hopin, and I've been with the company for about exactly 2 years now in October. And I love marketing to an audience of event professionals. I think Hopin is in a really exciting space right now with, all of the different types of events that people are organizing on marketing teams. And there's some great customer stories. And my background includes being in a marketing role at a number of different startups, but including Eventbrite, which I was on the marketing team for about 4 years. So I'm returning to the event industry as our user base that we market to, which is super exciting. And Hopin's been quite the rocket ship. I joined as the third hire on the marketing team back in 2021, October of 2020. And now we have about 40 people that are on the marketing team. So lots of growth, lots of excitement, and many hats that we've been wearing. But it's been really great seeing all of the awesome things we've been able to do for our customers.
Well, and so for my listeners in the B2B DM gang, I mean, most of us are looking to, as you say, event professionals in order to provide us some of the things that we need in order to be able to generate sales, right? So when we start looking at that and what your experience and what you're bringing to it is, a lot of us are asking is that, hey, how are we going to be able to, as you said, your title is demand. How can we increase demand? How can we identify potentially, ideal prospects and customers? How can we move from something which is just merely a registration, to something that we can actually, understand and maybe have it to a little bit more sales qualified, so that we can invest our time and effort and hopefully closing some more deals, right? It's
absolutely.
That's all important stuff. And you are as we were talking and preparing for this time in this interview, we started talking about, well, what's going to be new for 2023? And, we talked about the shifts and the changes, and we know that's not going to stop. And so I think maybe that's a good place for us to start. As you said, one of the things that's going to be vitally important for 2023 is agility and resiliency. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, agility, resiliency, the pivot. There's so many words that I think can really describe the last couple of years and how the event professional industry has really risen to the occasion. And we have an event trends report that we published for 2022. And the title of it was "The Show Must Go On." And it's really cool to see how, there have been a lot of obviously changes that event professionals have had to step up and new skills that have been learned and new ways of doing things. But if there's one thing that we found over the last couple of years is events and marketing professionals that have events as a part of their strategy have become flexible and been able to, make changes on the fly. And it's been a challenging year, but also a really exciting one because We've had a lot of really great technology that's now come up because as a reaction to everything that's happened over the last couple of years. People have more choices and more tools that are available to them to engage with their communities in a really authentic way. And, now event marketers have so many choices available to them. And events aren't easy. Events are hard. Event professionals can all, relate to when things go wrong and the fires you have to put out. And, you and I talked about how there's a plan B, but then also a plan C and plan D, and, really thinking through, what happens when things go awry, which happens pretty frequently. But events are the most direct way that you can communicate with your audience and your community where they exist. And it's, this direct line of communication. It is amazing when you have an incredible event and then you see the ROI after. And somebody signs up for your event, maybe they attend, and then, you see those results that are driven after, and, making sure you have the proper attribution set up to do so. But event experiences can be really impactful and powerful. So it's really important for event organizers to be agile and really think through, based off of the goals, what type of event makes most sense, because now there's just so many different options that you have.
Well, and that's part of what we had talked about as well, saying maybe our first step would be to possibly reduce our options and then do a proper job of aligning, what our goals and objectives are. Because one thing that you said to me, which kind of like it rung a bell and it made sense. And for me, when I started thinking about part of, being a part of an event, is it's like, oh yeah, that is true. And it wasn't consideration, is that hybrid. We're like, hey, it's the easy thing to do. We'll have the benefits of both worlds. You're like, well, you're actually doing two events simultaneously that you have to manage. I mean, it's a totally different, resource deployment and strategy that has to be put in place when you start talking about a hybrid. Can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think hybrid has been such a buzzword over the last couple of years, and we're still kind of figuring out what it means. And there's so many options. One of the trends that we had identified for 2022 that I think is going to carry into 23 is there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to hybrid, and hybrid isn't always the answer. It's definitely more taxing in terms of the resources that you need to allocate if you're doing a hybrid experience. We actually did our own hybrid event back in July of 2021, which is really important for us to also empathize with our customers that are doing hybrid events. You really need to think through the staffing, the budget requirements, production needs for two separate events that are many times happening simultaneously. What does that experience look like for attendees that are in the room? It's going to look very different than those attendees that are online. And, hybrid events aren't the same as they were. When someone would say a hybrid event, a couple of years ago, that might have meant, oh, we're going to live stream it, and then people will be able to tune in online. And that's not what people are doing with hybrid anymore. It's really, really cool to see the engagement that someone can, plan for their event, and the experience that you have for someone that's joining you virtually. That's an experience that you need to have a dedicated budget, team, and resources for, and really think through, what the differences are for those two audiences. So hybrid can be expensive. I mean, it's definitely something that you need to think through when it comes to figuring out your budget based off of your goals and what kind of results that you want to be driving. But hybrid events can be really great because you have this in-person experience that you're creating, but then you also have this global accessibility that you open up when people are able to join you from anywhere. And hybrid events can have a huge impact. So you really just need to think through, do you have the bandwidth in order to make it a successful experience for both audiences on site and then also joining you online.
So, when you start thinking and talking about that, and I don't know of many organizations that have just the sheer manpower, not even talking about skill sets, the manpower of doing two events at one time. So how do you pull that off if that's your choice and the path you want to take?
So there's a lot of options that are available to marketing teams when it comes to the resources and staffing for their events. There are event agencies that you can bring on to help you specifically with an event or a series of events in order to give you that manpower and expertise when it comes to production and all of the different nuances to execute an event effectively. You also, we found that with technology, there's a lot of tools that make production really easy and accessible for people that may not have like an AV background, for example. One of the companies that Hopin acquired in the beginning of 2021 is StreamYard. And so that's now a part of our multi-product offering that we have available to event organizers. And it's a live streaming platform. And something that I love about StreamYard, I'm kind of obsessed with it. They are a live streaming platform that makes it really easy for someone to have a really amazing, well-branded, beautiful stream, but not maybe necessarily that production background that can be required when you're putting something like, a virtual event together. And so it's very easy for someone to, have custom branding and pull comments from the chat onto the screen and have it all, be a very beautiful experience. There's just a lot of tools that make it super easy. That's just one of them that comes top of mind for someone that, is developing their skills with all of the nuances that are required for a virtual experience. But for us, for our hybrid event, we thought through which people on the team were going to be staffing certain areas. And so I actually led the team that was in charge of the online experience. And so we were monitoring the chat and pinning comments and links and monitoring the online expo and all of the things that were related to the online experience, kind of in a control room on site at our event that was in Los Angeles. And we had to think through, like, in terms of staffing, who's going to be in charge of this event versus the event that's happening online. And we had that appropriate staffing with our customer success managers and marketing team members and people that were kind of owning both pieces.
Well, as part of that, you had mentioned, the experience, right? I'm responsible for that part of the business, and you have to have two people responsible for those different experiences. And you said the word experiential is kind of one of those buzzwords as well. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're seeing experiential come up so frequently when it comes to job titles and teams that are being built out. And there's so many different types of, we started referring to our customers and our users as experience creators instead of event organizers or meeting planners, because there's so many different use cases for an online or hybrid in-person event. And, it's interesting because our customers range from, event marketers and people that work at a corporate company and they have a team that does events, and maybe field marketing, demand generation is in their title. But then we also see, internal teams, people teams that use us for their internal events. So their weekly all hands or their quarterly company meeting, and employee engagement is their KPI. They have things that they use to measure the employee experience, and an event is part of their strategy. So there's a lot of different types of users that we have and a lot of different types of experiences that we create. But experiential marketing is, really, I think, been a trend that we've definitely seen continue to evolve, and the role in the team and that being an integral part of a marketing organization has been really interesting. We have a senior director of experiential marketing on our team at Hopin, and there's just so many different things you can do now, combining the virtual and the in-person events that you're organizing, and just really thinking outside the box and creatively and around how you're going to do it. It's really important for the revenue marketing side of the organization to work very closely with the experiential side to make sure that you're taking advantage of any opportunities to generate demand, drive business impact, and close revenue.
Well, another thing you talked about as far as trends, going into 2023 is, and we're seeing this a little bit, is in the way that you put it, to me, was quite interesting. You said, and so I wrote it down, I'm going to read it. It says that we're returning to face-to-face, but not the pre-pandemic past. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So because of everything that's happened over the last couple of years, and certainly the technology that has accelerated to meet the demand of, people doing things online and using a virtual format, even though we're so excited to be back to being in person, and I specifically love being in person. I love in-person events. But digital has really rewritten the playbook when it comes to events, and virtual events are here to stay. It's just a matter of what choices you make based off of your event goals and your objectives when you're going to employ virtual versus doing something in person, or then maybe even making the choice to do it hybrid. There's so many choices that are available now. So I think the most important thing when you're putting together a plan on creating an experience is you really want to think about what format makes most sense, because there's a digital layer that you can employ in so many different ways. And I think that it's really interesting also hearing from our customers when they decide to just stick with virtual for certain event experiences versus maybe there's, more frequent, smaller events that they're doing in person, like a dinner versus, their big summit. Maybe that's going to continue to be online. So, we're finding that there's been a lot of value that's been identified over the last couple of years with the virtual experiences. So we can't wait to get back to being in person. That's amazing. But there is going to be that, it's sticking around. It's definitely here to stay. And it's interesting seeing how, different brands are making that choice when it comes to what makes most sense to engage with their community.
So, as you're talking, I started, I'm thinking about talking about that pre-pandemic past. And it always used to be that event marketers would, especially when you start talking about like being an expo or a conference or something like that, would talk about, their attendees and the demographics of their attendees and all of that. If you start thinking about the demographics, across these different options, what are some of the things that stand out to you? Or I should say, what do you think is going to start happening into 2023 in regards to a lot of those demographic numbers?
I think that when you think about your audience, where they exist and where you're looking to engage with your community, I think it's really important to think about accessibility. We talk a lot about accessibility at Hopin. We have a lead on our team that specifically thinks about how to make events more accessible. And if you have a global audience, then you have so much opportunity with an online event to make your event incredibly accessible. And it's not just because if you have an event online, people can join you from anywhere because they're not physically present, but also you can do language translations. We just did an event recently where we had thousands of people that were joining us from all over the world. And we made the choice based off of where our audience was located to partner with a language translation application that translated our event into 5 different languages, including American Sign Language, which was so cool to see that, that interest and joining us from all over the world, and also our ability to deliver the content in a way that was going to be meaningful for all of the different people that were joining us. There's a lot of considerations when it comes to, making your event accessible that you can take into account, including captioning. We have closed captioning as a part of our native product that you can toggle on or off when you're, watching something on the stage or if you're in a session, but it's through AI, so it's not always completely accurate. We also have the opportunity to integrate with one of the platforms that is available that does human captioning and live captioning to make that accuracy much more accurate. So there's a lot of opportunity to, engage with the different people that you might now be able to reach that you couldn't have reached otherwise if you had just done a webinar program and not really thought through all of the considerations when it comes to making your event accessible.
Well, it goes back to that, looking at your choices, maybe reducing the options, because if not, so as you're talking, I'm like, oh, it's daunting.
So many things you can do.
That's right. Well, that goes into what you had talked about, how creativity, is definitely has always been important, but, talking about ratcheting it up in regards to the importance, creativity is that way. And so it leads me to believe, or to ask the question really, is what are some of the creative things that you've seen that organizations may want to start leveraging in 2023?
Yeah, I think that engagement online is something that is super important to make sure you take into account when you're doing virtual events. And there's so many platforms that do all of these cool things when it comes to engagement. I think before, when you thought about an online event, there's the chat and there's a poll. So you can do a poll and people can communicate in the chat. But now there's so many different things you can do in terms of quizzes and like fun photo booths that are online that people get super into. And then it makes a mosaic of everyone that attended the event. There's just a lot of really cool applications. We have a lot of neat features when it comes to engagement on our platform on Hopin. But something that I think is really interesting is we have an app store that has over 40 applications that you can integrate with if you choose to, use Miro for your collaboration, and you can actually whiteboard with people in a session the way that you would in person in a room. And, these tools are just really interesting ways to engage and collaborate with your audience. And I think that there's a lot of really cool things that you can do in terms of engagement. And that's only going to continue to evolve. I think that we've just seen a lot of really cool tech that's come out of the past couple of years because of the acceleration of the demand and need for experiences that are online. And we've just seen a lot of really cool events that our customers have done that have been like, it's not just, you're not just going to a meeting. You come in and everything's branded and you're excited to be there, and they kick off the event with a DJ, and people in the chat are fired up about the song, and they're sharing gifts and they're liking each other's comments. And, then after the big keynote that happens on stage, you move to the speed networking and you get to meet people one-on-one. And then, the next portion is, going to the sessions and having a breakout room. And it's just really cool to see how like the movement of an online virtual event for an attendee, it feels more like an in-person, not the same, but more like an in-person experience with all of the cool features that are available now to event organizers to create an experience where you actually feel more connected versus, watching a webinar on a screen and, maybe answering a question that gets answered. There's so many different ways that you can engage. And I think thinking about, based off of all the technology that's available to you, based off of your goals for your event, what makes most sense in terms of the engagement tactics, because there's so many things that you can now choose from.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm starting to think too about, people that would get involved and get engaged with some of these things. And, I've just seen situations where, depending on your target, who's involved is, they don't really do much anything at all. I mean, they're more in, attendance and observation type of mode, more so than, in an interactive mode. And so then I started thinking about all of the events that are out there and started looking at the number. I mean, it used to be the 20,000, person expo thing, was something that people religiously had done every single year, but I don't know if we're going to see those like we used to. The all week long Oracle event. Good luck with that. Is that really going to fly anymore? So it's, again, going into 2023 and thinking about the creativity. One of the things you mentioned too is the impact, right? The impact that it has to the business. What's one of the things that you think we need to absolutely take into consideration based off of that report and going into 2023 in that regard?
Yeah, I think something that a lot of marketers are experiencing right now are budget cuts. And so it's constantly the question of, how do I get more out of what I'm doing? And how do I extend the reach of the content that I'm putting together, the event experience that we're organizing? Because you can have a great experience, and then, you follow up and your SDRs fire away with their sequence, and you have the AEs doing more personalized follow-up. But we always think about, how can we get more from our content? After an event, we obviously will send the recordings to everyone that signed up, whether they were able to make it. We say, thanks for coming. If we missed them, sorry, we missed you. Here's the recording so you can check it out. Something that I love about one of our new features, it's called Hop and Replay, is you can get the recording immediately after your event and have it available to everyone that registered without having to download it and edit it and upload it, which obviously takes a lot of time, and it can be a bottleneck sometimes for that follow-up that you can't wait to send. And there's always the people that ask for the recording. You're like, just 1 second, I need to get it ready. Now with Hop and Replay, you can have that recording available right away and, trim it and do some editing if needed. I always love sending that follow-up immediately after the event, just with the recording, and making sure that people have it in their hands immediately, just to build off of that momentum that they had coming off of the experience. And then from there, our team thinks about, okay, we had this great event. We had 3 panel conversations, a keynote. How do we repurpose this, and how do we remix this, and how do we refresh this down the line in order to continue creating new content that doesn't necessarily have to start from scratch? Maybe we can build upon the really great insights that were shared from all of the different pieces that we had as a part of this one event. We sometimes will have, we have a more frequent cadence for our webinar programs, and we might have, 3 webinars across the course of a quarter, and we'll actually remix those pieces and put that into a white paper or a blog post or a piece of content that can, use all of the kind of key takeaways that we had from 3 completely separate topics and put it into another format that can be digested in a different way. And when I think about refreshing, we are always looking at our ebooks and guides and things that we've created over the course of time and when it makes sense to do a refresh. And I always think of our 2020 hybrid events guide, because our guide and our best practices and our insights from our customers were wildly different in October of 2020 than they are now. So we've refreshed that piece of content a number of times. But it's really cool to see all of the neat things that you can do after an event by taking that video content that's gold and, turning it into a social media campaign and, putting together an email campaign that includes some of the highlights that are, you send to your database totally separate from the people that were able to attend and be there at the event. So I think it's really interesting thinking through, what are all of the different ways that you can repurpose, remix, and reuse the stuff that you've put together with your event to make sure that meaty content and that really great experience that you created can continue to drive results and ROI that you're looking to drive.
Okay. So when you start thinking about I've talked about the many constituents and stakeholders that are part of, the events, the promoter has to deliver on a lot of those expectations, and put all of these things together. And, so there's different objectives based off of those stakeholders. If I think about all of the, people that I now have to essentially answer to, I have a marketing person, I have a revenue person, I have, maybe even someone who's in, customer or client success. I have all these, people who I have to now answer to. If you start thinking about, going into 2023 and positions at that most high level part of the organization, where do you see the people who are putting on the events, where they have to now start giving more attention to that maybe they didn't have to do so in the past?
Yeah, I think that it's so important for an event head or lead or team to have great relationships cross-functionally with all areas of the business. And it's really important to have alignment as early in the process when you're putting together your experience as possible. Making sure that you're getting input from your customer success team and that you talk to the AE team on, what type of content is actually going to land based off of the conversations that they're having in the field. And, they have the most front of line communication, the SDRs, the BDRs, the AEs, they have the most front of line communication with our target audience. So I always get feedback at the very beginning of the process of creating an experience to really think about, okay, what can drive impact here? What is going to attract the right people to join us? You were talking about how, one way to measure an event is the number of registrations, but it's really about who's registered, because at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at impact and, maybe your attribution, you look at multi-touch attribution, you look at pipeline, but then ultimately closed revenue. And, really at the end of the day, that's what we're looking to drive. We want to retain our customers. We want to create new business, and we want to make sure that our programs are driving impact in a really meaningful way. And one of the most important things is to make sure we get the right people there. So, if that means we need to adjust our messaging because an email that we sent to our target audience didn't land and drive registration, I always obsess over our Salesforce campaign and who's going to be there, who's signed up. Who should we make sure comes there? I mean, I think personalization is so important, and it's more than just putting the name of the lead or contact at the beginning of the email. We really try to personalize our invites as much as possible and really partner with the sales and go-to-market team at large on making sure that we're really thoughtful about everyone that we're inviting. And it can take a little bit more time to, be more personalized when it comes to certain accounts, but I think it's really important to really think through and strategize with the whole go-to-market team. When you have a great event experience, having them understand why we're putting it on, and it's to help them see success. I mean, whenever we do a marketing event, we want the sales team to get that this is an awesome opportunity for them to bring people to join us that they can then follow up with after. I do think that Hopin's in a very unique place because when someone joins us at an event online, they're also getting a demo of our product. So it's a really great opportunity for our team to showcase how wonderful and magical and amazing an experience using Hopin can be, because they're actually seeing it when they're attending the event. But we see a lot of really, really great events that our customers organize as well, and hearing from them the impact they were able to drive that they weren't able to drive before they started doing virtual events, and having that as a part of their strategy is really, really cool.
Well, okay. So as you're talking, I start, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but it'd be interesting to get your perspectives on, the whole 2022, 2023 focus in on maybe what I should not be doing, right? Because we can sit here and say, oh, you got to do more, 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 more. Guess what? You're going to have less, 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 less. I mean, it's like, okay, at some point you're like saying, I'm out of here. This is freaking ridiculous. Your expectations are way off the charts and this is not going to happen. And so I'll just go someplace else where they're just not as ridiculous as you are. And so we have to be able to say, okay, I have all these options and opportunities, but, and we talked about, I need to eliminate things in order for me to focus and be able to execute. So, into 2023, what is something I should probably stop doing?
That's a great question. I've been using the phrase "do less" a lot more frequently lately, there's a study that said that in-person events are being reduced in size by 75%. It's harder to get people to come out to an in-person event. And even with our online events, we're finding that people are busy. People are back to doing things. They're back to filling up their calendars. And I think people are a lot more selective when it comes to how they decide to spend their time. So I think that it's really important to not do more and not think that, having a higher volume of events is the answer. Really to take time to think about, how are you going to invest in, the experiences that you decide you want to focus on? How are you going to make that, the best experience for your audience? And that comes down to the promotion and making sure you have, the right speakers or the right incentive for people to join you, and really thinking through, why someone should choose to be with you versus all of the other things that they could be doing. And with remote work, people are, a lot of times, people are just busy. I mean, and it's a different type of busy than I think before, but I do think that we found that people are very selective when it comes to how they spend their time. So really thinking through your event promotion and making sure that in addition to attracting the volume of registration that you're looking to get for whatever type of event you're putting together, you also want to think through, okay, like, how am I going to make sure that these people show up? And what additional communication can I send about how great experience is going to be? So when something else comes up, they say, oh no, this is on my calendar. This is something that I've prioritized. It's all a massive prioritization exercise. And if you haven't given that much information about why your event's going to be so great, then maybe someone might choose to do something else last minute. So things come up. People are, always have things that come up last minute. They might have every intention of joining you, but then something prevents them from doing so. And we've always known that about events, but I do think it's just really important to over communicate and focus on the experiences that you want to really drive that impact and knock it out of the park.
Well, as you're saying that, somebody had brought it up to my attention, and they said something along the lines of, you have to identify what people's currency is. And somebody who I was with said, oh yeah, what are you going to pay them? And that's not what they meant by currency. What they meant by currency, could be, for example, avoiding a failure. It could be aspirational in nature, achievement or, growth or whatever the case may be. You said something that what you're seeing as in 2022 and going into 2023, which from a currency perspective is probably going to just continue to elevate. And that's something you said about community.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. Community is just something we continue to hear from our customers as being paramount. We don't know what's going to happen in 2023 necessarily, but I do think that a stronger sense of community, even stronger than what we've seen in recent years, is a trend that we're going to continue to see. And I think that we're also seeing a trend towards more smaller, frequent events versus just one massive conference. There's so many different ways you can build community with different personas, different targets, different people that are a part of that B2B buying decision-making process. And I think that people are being a lot more strategic about how they engage with those different personas and doing it in unique and creative ways versus just having a catch-all event that they do once a year. That there is a place for that, certainly. And, it's interesting because I think marketing teams are really just looking at their strategy now and thinking about it a little bit differently than maybe they did a couple of years ago. And community is just it's something that is, going to continue to be a trend that we're seeing with events.
Okay. So we're sitting here. I'm a, person who's responsible for, the B2B marketing for an organization. I may be, hopefully I am partnering with somebody who's doing some event activities for me. I have some responsibilities in regards to, revenue and conversion. So it's, a whole lot of things on my plate. You could say there's tons of hats that I have to wear, but what's one thing that I should be thinking?
I think one thing that you should be thinking about is just how to partner with the events organization from the beginning with the goal setting and really figuring out based off of what, the business has seen with previous experiences and previous campaigns and activations and landed, what experience is going to drive those results and what are some of the key, considerations to take into account when building the program, because I think that alignment at the beginning is super key in order to make sure that you're driving those results after the fact.
Strategy being vital. Brianna Haag, great discussion. How does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
You find me on Twitter, Brianna_Haag. You can follow Hopin on LinkedIn, Twitter. We're now on TikTok and Facebook at Hopin Official. But yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anyone that's part of the DM gang.
Brianna Haag, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.